Okay, welcome to our share, Shuas, Tavshin Pei Aleph, and Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to talk a little bit about Rus. But first, we'd like to make today's share as a schus for all the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. As we all know, we're going through a very, very difficult matzav in Eretz Yisrael, and our hearts go out to everybody there, and Bems and Yidden worldwide, because when something happens in Eretz Yisrael, we're all in sakana. So we dive into the Rebbeinu Shloim that he should guard, be the Shem Yisrael, guard over all of us. In Mitzvah Hashem, we should make it through without anybody chas v'shalom being hurt or in any way. And hopefully, our share today will be a little bit of a schus for Klal Yisrael. Also, on a much, much happier note, I want to wish Mazel Tov to my first Einukel. They got married, and that's Esti and Aaron Reuben, and I wish them a life filled with nachas and mazel and the ability to accomplish much for Klal Yisrael as they build a beautiful Bayis Ne'eman Yisrael. So, mazel tov. Okay, so we have the beautiful Rus, just a few prakim, but very, very emotional. I always find that I cry when we read Rus. It's such a tale of emunah, of betochen, of ehrlichkeit, of there's so many lessons to be learned. So I'd like to talk about just two. In the first parak, we find, as we know, that Elimelech goes out to stay Mayav with his sons Machla and Kilyan, and they marry Rus and Orpah, and all the three men die, and then Naomi, who's the mother, comes back with her two daughters-in-laws. And of course, we know that only Rus stays with her. But in Pasuk Zayin, it tells us Vateitze min hamakom hazeh. They went away from that place, right? She asher hayis shama, that they were there. The woman and her two daughters. Okay, so she goes back to Yehuda. And Rashi famously tells us, asks the question. Of course, it says Vateitze min hamakom. That's extra, it's Ibrik. What do we need to say that they went away from a place? As long as they were in a place, we know when they went to Yehuda, they left. So Rashi famously says, as he does by Yaakov, which we'll talk about, says, Yitziyat Tzadik min ha'ir Eiser Roshim, that when Tzadik goes out of a city, it makes a difference. Pana Ziva, Pana Haida, and by Yaakov it says Pana Adar, it says here Pana Shvacha, and the city is different. It says, as it says by Yaakov. That's what Rashi tells us. So the kasha I always had is it says Magid, that it's telling us by Rus. Magid, it tells us that the tzaddik goes out of the city, Pana Ziva, Pana Haida, Pana Adar, Pana Shvacha. And l'chayr, what does it mean it tells us here? We already know it by Yaakov. Even Rashi says we know it by Yaakov. So what is the chiddush by Rus that it says Magid? It could just say that Pana Ziv Tzad Eiser Roshim, Pana Ziv Pana Haida, like Yaakov. Why does it say Magid? It teaches us. What's it teaching us by Rus differently than it taught us by Yaakov? So I'd like to say that there's a difference between a man leaves the city and a woman leaves the city. Yaakov left the city, but he was involved with the city. He was out there. He was in public. He went to shul every day. You know, a man is out much more in the public than a woman is. So when the man leaves the city, so I understand. Eiser Roshim makes a Roshim because everybody knows he left. He's not there anymore. He's not at the head of the Beis Din. He's not in the shuls. He's not there. But a woman, you say she's home. Called Kfuda Bas Melk Pnima. She's not as much in the public. So I might think that perhaps that it doesn't make such a roshim on the city. And the answer is no. The tzaddik makes as much of a roshim on the city as the tzaddik. Her just being in the city with her tzidkis. And you take a look at the entire story of Rus. Rus is a very internal story, right? It's not something that goes out into the public. It's not like Esther went out into the public. Esther became a queen. But Rus is very internal. But nevertheless, when Naomi leaves the city, the tzaddikus leaves the city, it makes a roshim, and that's what it teaches us. You know, it's very interesting, the entire concept of a tzaddik leaving a city. I remember a story that it said when the Chazon Ish was nifter, so the Brisker Rav said a hesped on the Chazon Ish. And the Brisker Rav said that there are two worlds that we all live in. There was a world with the Chazon Ish, and there's a world without the Chazon Ish. And it's so true. When the Chazon Ish was there was a final psak, there was a Gadol Hador, there was somebody everybody agreed on, this is a Gadol Hador. When the Chazon Ish wasn't there, said the Brisker Rav, it's a different world. That Kedusha, that Tahara, that Torah, that Psak, everything Chazon Ish isn't here. It's a different world. I remember how we all felt that so keenly when Rav Moshe was nifter. I remember Rav Chaim Spitzer gave a hesped. It was so beautiful. And he was yelling and screaming, Rav Moshe, Rav Moshe, Rav Moshe. Every Rav had that number, his number on their desk, on their phone. And he said the number. And he said, everybody, Rav Moshe, Shailet, Rav Moshe, Shailet, Rav Moshe, Shailet, Rav Moshe. Because the tzaddik is so central to everything that we are. And that's interesting. In the beginning of Pirkei Avos, it says, Moshe Kibel Torah Misenim Asar Li Yeshua. Yeshua the Zakenim Anshe Knesset Gedayla. There was a Tekufum, there was a Moshe Rabbeinu, when there was one person who was such a great tzaddik, the entire door. Yeshua, one tzaddik, the entire door. After that, it went to Zakenim. It went to many people. Many people were there to take the role of the one person that Yeshua and Moshe were. So we see that concept, the Yetziat Tzaddik Meneir. Tzaddik plays such a fundamental role. Unfortunately, people don't always recognize it. That's why it says, I was thinking, it says, Pona Ziva, Pona Haida, Pona Hadar. What does that mean? It turns. Pona's turns. It turns here, it turns there. What does that mean? It turns to the Haid, turns to the Hadar. And I was thinking it's like a diamond, a Yalom. A diamond is it has many facets. If you turn the diamond this way, you see this color, you see this facet. If you turn the diamond that way, you see a different facet. A tzaddik has many facets. Many. He's Talmid Chacham, he's kind, he raises children, he does, like all of us, the truth is, has many facets. Pana Ziva. But when he was in the city, and he was giving teichacha to the people, they couldn't see him clearly because they only saw him in relationship to themselves. Am I going to go into shul and get in trouble for coming late? Am I going to go into shul and I wasn't putting my tefillin on? I'm always worried that tzaddik's going to tell me you didn't behave properly, you didn't do this, you spoke in shul, whatever. The tzaddik's not there. I can see him more clearly. I can see all the different facets. When he's alive, I only see the facet as it applies to me. When he's not alive, I can see him in his totality. Pana Ziv, I can look at the Ziv. Pana Haid, I can look at the Haid. Pana Adara, I can look at the Hadara. I can look at everything different. I see the tzaddik in a totally different way when he's not there. And that's why it says, Yetziat tzaddik min ha'ir, Oisarayshim. It makes a mark. People see it differently. They finally see it maturely. I always like to say that when the Jewish Observer was, and Mitzvah, it's coming back, when the Jewish Observer was there, so I used to complain to Rabbi Walpin that he always wrote these fabulous articles about tzaddikim after they're no longer alive. I said, why didn't you write the article when he was still alive? I would have gone to see him. I didn't realize he was such a big tzaddik. I didn't know. But that's it. When the Rabbi tzaddik is alive, we only see him in a more monochromatic way. When the tzaddik's not alive, we begin to understand all of the greatnesses we spoke about in a shir a number of months ago. When somebody goes through Menachem Avil, often they speak to a family member, to a child who says, I never knew my father and my mother did this, I never knew they did that, I never knew. So when a person's alive, we don't always see them in their totality. When the person's not there, then we can see them more fully. And that's Pana Ziva, Pana Haid, and Pana Adar. And one final thought. I remember when I lived in Flatbush, there was a yeshiva there, Zichron Melech. And the yeshiva moved from East 32nd Street, and it moved to Ditmas Avenue, where it is to this day. A great yeshiva. And I remember when the yeshiva moved out, I had a friend, and the friend was mamish with tears in his eyes. He came to me and said, Oy, All is lost. We lost the yeshiva, the ziv of the yeshiva is gone, the pana ziva, pana haida, pana adara. And his mom's crying, the yeshiva is not here anymore, the neighborhood's not the same, it's going to be just without the yeshiva. He was like so distraught. And I said to him, I was upset, because I had been involved in trying to get people to come learn in the yeshiva. And I said, I went to you every single day, and I tried to get you to go into the yeshiva to learn, and you never once went in. What are you getting all, now you're getting a chutzpah, you're getting all huffy? So he said, what's that got to do with me? So I'm not a good person. I didn't go into yeshiva to learn. Does that mean that yeshiva is not great? Does that mean pana ziva, pana haida, pana adar? He starts crying again. I thought that was greatness. He was willing to even get defensive. He rightly said, okay, so I'm not where I should be in life. But the yeshiva is the yeshiva. So it's not, so tzaddik leaves. And a tzaddik doesn't just mean the tzaddik, it means tzaddikim, it means institutions. And we have to daven for all of our tzaddikim that they should all be Mayrich, Yamim, Vishanim. And Rus Baruch Hashem Nami, they made a Roshim, they left. And remember one last thought. They left a Geisha city. They left Mayav. They weren't leaving a from place. They weren't leaving Bnei Brak or Yerushalayim, whom people appreciated. They were leaving a state Mayav to go back to Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov, there were no other Yidden. That's the tzaddik makes a roshim in ways for people who don't even understand what the tzaddik is bringing there. That's the difference. There was no keshes, there was no rainbow in the time of the tzaddik. Tzaddik can bring benefits to a city even if the city doesn't realize it. Adkan, more to talk about. We'll do that in the future. I want to talk about one other thing. The story of Rus in the beginning of Perek Gimel, when she comes to Bayis. So Naomi, the story was that Naomi tells her, look, you've been here for a while, he hasn't yet said anything about the shidduch, we have to take some action over here, so I want you to dress up, go in the middle of the night, and I want you to go by his bed, and when he gets up, he'll tell you what to do. And that's what she tells her. So she dresses up, she goes there, she lays Eitzel Margaloisav, and he wakes up in the middle of the night, Batilofis, and he's like shocked. And he says, who are you? And she says, Ani Rus Amasecha, I'm Rus, your maidservant. And she tells him, Parasta knafecha like gailata. Spread your garment on me, because you are my gail. So if you remember, we once told a story that I heard from Rabbi Michal Tursky, the Hornsteipler Rebbe of Milwaukee, the Rav of Congregation Beis Yehuda for over half a century. And he told a story that happened in the early 1950s when the Ponevezher Rav came to Milwaukee. And the Ponevezher Rav, Rabbi Michal at that time, and his brother Aaron were just bar mitzvah, he said. And they, with the Azaz to Kedusha of kids, so they asked the Ponevezher Rav, tell us, you're a Talmud of the Chofetz Chaim, you knew the Chofetz Chaim, tell us a story, Chofetz Chaim story. So he said, I'll tell you a story. So he said he was in Pennsylvania, in a small town. In that town, the Yiddishkeit was very weak. The shul was some Alta Yidden, the youth were not so from Nebuch anymore, and things just were, it was dying. But there was one Yid who was totally on fire. It was an Eish Lahava. He was davening with Kavana, he was learning with Kavana, he was filled with fire of Yiddishkeit. And the Ponevezher Rav was taken aback. Whoa, what happened to this person? How is it that the rest of everybody else is like, and we call them, Torah zombies, and he's mom's alive. So he asked him, he said, let me ask you, you see what's going on in this city, tell me, how do I understand this? So he said, I'll tell you, Rebbe, I was a Talmud in Radin by the Chofetz Chaim. And here's a story that happened to me. When I was 13 years old, I was a bacher. My father, I was supposed to start in Chodesh El. And my father was going to bring me to Rad, and I got sick. I wasn't well. I couldn't go to yeshiva. So I had to wait through Sukkot, Yom Tovim, Sukkot. After Sukkot, Baruch Hashem, I got better, I recovered. And my father brought me to Rad. So he walks into the Chofetz Chaim with me to, for the he already was admitted. I just had to, So he comes and he tells the Chofetz Chaim, my son was sick, he couldn't come, and now we're here. He says, the Chofetz Chaim turns white. He goes, "Oy, I forgot that you're coming. It was such a long time. I just put out of my mind, and I don't know what to do now. I don't have room in the dormitory. I don't know where are we going to put you?" The Chofetz Chaim's thinking, he says, "No, but it's not right. The Becker comes to my yeshiva, and I already accept him. I have to take you in. What should I do?" And he says, "Oh, I have an idea. I have in my office a bench. You can sleep on the bench until I figure out where we're going to put you." Fine. So the Becker wasn't like all that crazy about it. The Chofetz Chaim was already a legendary in his time. The Becker was very, very nervous to sleep in the Chofetz Chaim's office. It wasn't what he was expecting. He's all of 13 years old. But okay. So he goes and he lays down on the thing. The Chofetz Chaim says good night. So he lays down. He can't sleep. He's like a wreck. He's the journey, the whole Maisa that happened. He can't sleep. So he's laying there, and all of a sudden the door opens. And the Chofetz Chaim walks in. So he quickly pretends to be sleeping because he doesn't want to make him feel bad that he wasn't sleeping. So he, leans over, starts to sleep. So the Chofetz Chaim looks at him and talks to himself and says, "Oy, how do I let this Becker sleep without a blanket? It's going to be cold. It's going to be uncomfortable." He says, "But I don't know what to do. There's no more blankets left. They're all in the dormitory." Right? See previous Maisa. So he's thinking, and then he says, "You know what? I have an idea. I'm going to take my rekel off. I'm going to put it on top of it, and I'll put him, and that way he'll be warm." And the Chofetz Chaim takes off his rekel, puts it on top of this Becher. And he said, the minute the Chofetz Chaim did it, I felt so warm. I felt so loved. I felt such ava coming from the Chofetz Chaim. I fell asleep like a baby. And he says, and that warmth and that ava of that rekel has warmed my neshama for 30 years, and that's why I am who I am today. Everything you see is because the Chofetz Chaim put his rekel on top of it. So he heard the stories and said, "You see what Ava can do? What Ava can do for another person, what concern can do for another person." I had the schus of speaking at the Sheva Brachas of my Einikel, and I told the story, and I said, "This is your shalom biases. You're going to put your reklach on each other. You're going to be there for each other," and that's what's symbolized. And then I saw this pasuk. I said, "Wow, Baruch Shekivanti," because in this pasuk, this is what Rus tells Bayas. Bayas, this is what marriage is all about. She doesn't say, "Marry me." She doesn't say, "You're my guile, beguile me." She says, "Put your knafayach light, put your robe on top of me." And the truth is, knafayach is the corner of the robe, not even the whole robe. The kanaf is the corner. HaKanaf psil tchelos. So that's when you take from yourself the thing that you cover yourself with, the thing that brings you warmth, and you put on another person. That is marriage. That is Ava. So just like, and it's there forever. So just like the Chofetz Chaim, that rekel, that was parsuk nafayach alai, is mamish the same thing. And you see it changed this person for his whole life. In the same way, Ruf said, "You can change my life too. Parsuk nafayach alai. Take your rekel and put it on top of me, and that's going to be there forever. And that's going to be." And from that came Malchus Beis David. From Boaz and Rus came Malchus Beis David. And Malchus Beis David was all the Tillim, which talks about the Ava of the Rebbeinu Shalom putting his kanaf on Klal Yisrael. And that's what we daven for. So here we are in this time of sakana, incredible sakana for Klal Yisrael. And how beautiful it is that we're learning Rus, and we're learning from Rus how a relationship works. She said to Boaz, "Put your kanaf alai." We turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom now in this terrible time of tsar, a potential tragedy, and shouldn't be. And we ask Rebbeinu Shalom, "Farasta knafecha alai, aleinu." Put your garment over us. Put your rekel over us. The Chofetz Chaim's rekel. Hashem, put your rekel. guard us, protect us, put us under the warmth of everything that you have. Hashem should help us that this should all end pleasantly, happily, and permanently for Shalom al Yisrael. And Hashem should always put His knafayach alaynu. We should all put our knafayach on each other, and in that way we will all have Shalom that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves so much. Have a good Shabbos and a good Yontif.